I know why you're here, you know why I'm here. I'm going to try to not take up too much of your time, but this is going to be a tier list of all the major boss fights in Lords of the Fallen. There's a few optional fights spread out across the map too, but I just want to get into all the ones that are essential to finishing the game. In total, there's 25 bosses that are required to beat in order to progress, and this is going to be a list easiest to hardest. So the first portion of the video should all be easy cakewalks, and the latter half is going to be the ones that actually gave me some trouble. I also want to say I kind of messed up and deleted some of my boss fight footage after I had already made a separate video on Lords of the Fallen, so I'm going to try to make up for it with normal fights if they're a regular mob, or a cutscene if I can. Also, if you don't have time for the whole video, no worries, I'll try to throw a timestamp in the description and on screen for the top 10 list. I'll also try to throw in a hint or two for each boss when I get around to it. And with that all out of the way, let's just jump straight in. Starting off at number 25, bottom of the barrel. The easiest fight you will have in Lords of the Fallen is Holy Bulwark Auto. I think I said that right, Bulwark? Who knows? There's going to be a lot of weird ones on this list. This is pretty self-explanatory since this is literally the very first fight in the game. This is basically the tutorial still. And also, this guy's not really a boss at all, he just ends up being a normal bar enemy at the end of the fight. If you need any tips for getting past this guy, you honestly might just want to try getting the Steam refund while you still can. Number 24 is another freebie too, Scourge Sister Delith. This is also like just another one of the little tutorial bosses that you fight early on too, just kind of getting your bearings for the world, and they mainly just want you learning how to break the little umbral protection. I also can't even really think of a tip for this one. It's still so super early in the game, and this is basically just a tutorial boss. At number 23, the Infernal Enchantress. Now these first couple entries, you'll notice a running theme here where these are all regular enemies that are first introduced as red bar battles. So they're technically not bosses, but since they have their own red bar section that is required, then they make the list. This fight's pretty easy, just a little bit crazier than the last one. The hardest part of the battle is trying to take away the little umbral orbs. Tips for this would definitely be just to stock up on any fire wards you can get your hands on. The fight isn't hard, but the fire damage can definitely take you out quick if you're not careful. At number 22, we have Abyss Ursula. This is another one of those regular mob fights, but her magic damage is pretty strong if you're not careful. Still a really easy fight though. She basically just sends out long range attacks the whole time and teleports away when you get close. So just run up, get your 2 taps, and then just wait till she moves. At number 21, we have the Skin Stealer. Now this guy was incredibly easy. Now he has some quick combos, but at least for me, I swear they were all coming perfectly in groups of 2, so I got the timing down like instantly. And like the rest, he's really just a regular mob after this. This is just his big red bar moment. A tip for this would be to dodge towards him so you end up behind his back every time after his attack. He hits like a little lunge each time, so you just keep trading lunges and attack his back. Number 20 on our list is the Hollow Crow boss fight. Now this honestly didn't feel like a boss fight at all, it was so easy. But it's not like a normal mob fight, so it gets a little boost up the list. This fight you're literally just chasing the ghost around and giving her a little bop on the head. The hardest part of this fight is the crow shooting ice at you, but they're all still pretty easy quick time dodges. And the rate that they come out is super manageable. Tips for this would be to just bring in some frost wards to keep up that resistance, and honestly just try going in there immediately in Umbral. If you're in Umbral, you're already ready to go aggro on the ghost, but if you're in the overworld, you have to soul flay her out into the open before applying damage. At number 19, we have Adir. This fight really disappointed me. It's only one phase, but I almost wish there was a second phase of actual fighting. The boss fight itself is just random mob clearing that can be straight done in your sleep. The hardest part of this whole fight is just figuring out what's going on at first, but once you get that down, you'll literally first try it no problem. Number 18 is Rapturous Huntress of the Dusk. This is where the list starts to switch to the actual boss fights that aren't complete cheese or a regular enemy. With that being said though, this makes Rapturous Huntress the easiest of the real boss fights on the list. This fight still isn't anything crazy. She uses a spear that's really easy to time for dodging, and there's a lot of room to maneuver. The only crazy trick she has is pulling out some holy magic that will cut the map down, but the fight's still the same. Don't panic and you'll be fine. Number 17 is Sacred Resonance of Tenacity. This is another pretty straightforward, pretty slow moving boss. I can't speak for anyone else, but I was honestly just getting this guy straight up stun locked. He couldn't even touch me. I didn't want to put him way down the list just because I had an easy time though. He still had some moves that have huge 1-2 shot potential if you're not careful, and you have to disable the umbral orb thingies in the room protecting him. Tips for this would be to just go immediately for the umbral orbs and fight the boss in the back of the room away from the other mobs. They'll eventually just die out anyways. Number 16 is Damarose the Marked. This was another one I actually didn't have any trouble with at all, but considering the fat amount of Inferno damage she can deal, I figured it gets a little bit more respect than the last two. Still a pretty slow swinging, easygoing fight. For this, I'd say just stock up on some fire awards for the Inferno damage. Number 15, the Spruined Progeny. These huge monster fights always seem really manageable, and this one's really no different. These kind of fights honestly just feel like a waiting game. If I'm doing bad, it's mainly just because I'm getting impatient. There's always tons of time to react in whatever way is necessary, but don't get me wrong. This guy's one-shot or delete potential is crazy, and the fight's pretty long, so he gets bumped up a couple places. The hardest part of this whole encounter is definitely just the first phase because he's so unpredictable, but once you're up on the platforms, you can see the hits from a mile away. As far as tips, during the first phase on the ground, I would try to avoid locking until you're legit about to go run up and hit. Then I'd immediately turn off the lock, because whenever I just kept the target lock on my screen, it would just start going all over the place. Number 14, the Blessed Carrion Knight Senisho. This guy isn't super crazy at all, basically just a big normal mob except for his huge poison AoE attack. If you find any problems in this fight, it'll just be from that, whether it's your health or overall visibility. He moves really slow, so just don't get impatient, stick to your 1-2 swings and dodge. This one's pretty straightforward, just stock up on some poison cures. You shouldn't have too much trouble. If you're out of cures, there's also a ring that negates poison damage, but I don't even know where to get it. I'm sure there's a wiki for it somewhere. Number 13, the Kingrenar Guardian Folard. Now this guy is also just a regular old Joe Schmo mob after this fight, but inside the room he has dogs and an umbral orb you have to disable before applying damage. And if you die and go into the umbral, there's one of those big walking faces in there ready to eat you. So not fun at all, but it's still not a hard fight once the dogs are gone. After that, it's just a straight up axe swinging one-on-one. A tip for this fight would be to stay out of the water so your speed isn't hindered, and really try to beat him out of umbral so you don't have to deal with the walking face man. Number 12, the Sundered Monarch. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but this fight felt really long, which just gives him more time to wear you down if you're not careful. A tip for this guy would be to just try and stay as hugged up to him as you can. A lot of times he'd swing and I'd mistime my dodge, but still not get hit because I'm just like not in the right range for it. Number 11, Gentle Gavarus, Mistress of Hounds. Now I'm not even gonna lie, this fight straight pissed me off. It's insane I'd even put her this high considering she's just a regular mob after this, but her little hellhounds do probably 95% of the lifting for this. You start off walking in, she has 2 dogs with her, and keeps calling in more to help mid-fight. So you have to constantly dance around those 2 while trying to do damage to the actual boss. The boss herself isn't very hard, she's mainly just using a bow the whole time, and has a small 2-swing sword combo when you get close. But goodness, I hate the dogs in these Souls likes. As far as tips, just try to kill one of the dogs instead of both to delay the spawn a bit. It's a lot easier dancing around the one dog opposed to 2. As soon as you kill both, she's just going to start calling more in. Next, we have finally made it to the top 10 list, everybody. Everything before this list could honestly be considered pretty easy and manageable, but this is where the list really starts to take it up a notch. Everything in the top 10 besides one took me multiple attempts to complete, and I consider these to be a real challenge in the game. Remember too that this is all really just my opinion. There might be a boss you thought should have been in here that isn't, or vice versa, but you know, just getting back to it, at number 10, we have the Congregator of Flesh. Now this is another big mob boss fight. The only reason I have it higher than Progeny or the Monarch is because you're actually more in the trenches with this fight. You're like moving around, not just up on the raised stage, and it's a lot earlier in the game than those two, so your character really isn't all that kitted out yet. This guy has some pretty quick attacks too for his size, not gonna lie. He was catching me off guard a lot more than I expected. A tip for this guy would be to try to stay behind him during the fight. He has an attack where he jumps on his back, so be on the lookout for that, but it's a lot easier to dodge attacks staying away from his front side. Next at number 9, we have the Crimson Rector Percival. Now this honestly might have been my favorite fight of the whole game. I don't know why, there was just a certain fluidity to it that made it a really enjoyable fight. It's nothing crazy, it's still just your normal swordsman 1v1, but he also has little shadow clones that he throws out at times, and they can combo up to 3 times. And he can regain his health once it drops below a certain margin. I was fighting that regen for a minute, it felt like that fight took forever. A tip for this guy would be to be on the lookout for umbral orbs around the arena, and try to blow them up next to him when he's healing to stop the process. Next at number 8 we have the Iron Wayfarer. Now this was actually the one I was talking about earlier that I first tried on the list. He kind of caught me off guard and I was pretty scared to lose my vigor in there too. But anyways, I still just feel like this fight should have been a lot harder than it was. Like, just because I got it first go doesn't mean other people did too. And trust me, I was really close to dying a few times. I got lucky. This fighting arena is really close quarters. There's not much room to back off and regain, and his wither damage is crazy. If you get caught with a hit while your whole health bar is withered, it's going to be donezo quick. A tip for this would be to try and bring some sort of AoE health like I have here with the javelins. These are great for health. You can place multiple all over the place. And since the arena is so small, it's easy to stay in them and actually heal. Number 7, we have the Ruiner. Now I know this guy does end up being a recurring mob later on, but it just doesn't feel right putting him so low considering this guy was actually pretty damn hard. There's a lot of factors at play here too. The bridge isn't small, but it's close quarters when you actually do start fighting. This guy is also pretty big and has some pretty quick, extremely punishing attacks when actually in combat. On top of all that, he deals fire damage, and on top of all that, he spawns a little idol on the ground that'll make it so your hits feel like chewed up marshmallows if you don't destroy it. A tip for this guy would be whenever he places one of those idols on the ground, try to lure him down to the other side of the bridge so you can safely destroy it without him attacking. Next at number 6 we have the Light Reaper. This guy is pretty insane. He probably has the fastest combos in the game that I can think of, and also deals progressively more fire damage as the fight goes on. Compared to the Ruiner, this guy is a lot faster, has more one-shot hits, deals more fire damage, not a ground mob after, and rides a dragon. I mean, come on, he's got it going on. This guy probably steals the Ruiner's girl. He shows up a couple times during the playthrough to test your might, but I wasn't able to kill him any of those other times. I had to wait till the end game fight. A tip for this guy would be to not even worry about attacking during the flying phase, because you won't be able to do any damage until he's on the ground. Just worry about dodging. Next at our top, number 5, hardest enemy, we have Pieta, She of the Blessed. Now this is actually your first real boss battle of the game, but old Pieta wasn't just a pushover. The main hard part of this whole thing is because it's so incredibly early, you literally have nothing but what the starting screen gave you, so you feel pretty weak in the fight, but that's obviously by design. Also, around a certain health threshold, she gets up and starts flying around dealing radiant damage while cutting off the map, so it's a great taste of what the game's going to be like when you first get in. Next at number 4 we have the Hushed Saint. This fight single-handedly gave me the most trouble out of all the rest in the game. Now I know what you're thinking. Lunar, what's going on here? Doesn't that mean it should be number 1? And yes, I hear that sentiment fully, but upon further reflection, it's not the fight itself that I was really struggling with. It was the fact that he would move around the screen so much that it would constantly break my camera lock. So I spent more time fighting my right joystick than the actual boss. I know this might not have been much of an issue for other people, but this took me like 3 hours. So I mean, if I could put my joystick up in number 1, I'd do that. But that's not how things work. I can't let the boss take joystick's cred like that. Also, everything up in our top 3 all have full bar second phases, so it's hard to really put anything that's not a second phase above those. With that whole rant out of the way, the Hush Saint, even without the camera problems, was still pretty difficult. He spends a lot of time up on the horse where you can't even deal damage, so it's mainly just a game of patience. You gotta just stay zoned in and try not to rush it. Tips for this guy, I mean, I am the wrong person to ask for. I did terrible on this. Just dodge and pray. As I mentioned a second ago, all of our top 3 boss battles have full second health bars that you have to take care of, which makes them all infinitely harder than the rest. It's not necessarily the combos that are crazy, even though some are. They're mainly harder because they feel like marathons compared to the rest of the fights. The amount of focus required is doubled, and the amount of mistakes allowed is cut in half. These are the kind of fights that'll have you talking to yourself in your head like, alright, here we go, we got this. Still got 3 flasks, I can do this. With that being said, next up at number 3, the 3rd hardest boss in the game, we have Harrower Dervla, the Pledge Knight, and the Unbroken Promise. This is actually the first 2-bar boss fight you have in the game, and even without the second phase, the Pledge Knight would still be deserving of being up in the top 10 list. All of these bosses would. While we're on this pair though, this fight gets really hectic really quick. There's a lot of magic use, and you spend a lot of time just running away from AoE explosions, whether it's from the Pledge Knight or the little demon girl up on the cliff. This is also the only boss fight out of the 3 that has a healing phase, but it's pretty easy to negate. The only reason I don't have it higher than the other 2 is because once the second phase starts, this is the only fight that's really still the same. They don't really change much up with combos or anything, so you don't have to relearn a lot. A tip for this fight, at least in the first phase, if she ever goes over to heal, just start unloading in grenades or whatever throwables you have, and it'll pretty much completely negate the heal. Next up, our second hardest boss of the game goes to Tancred, Master of Constellations, and Reinhold the Emired. This fight in both phases is pretty challenging, and this fight completely changes from phase 1 to 2, so there's a completely new set of moves to learn. The first phase has a huge emphasis on holy damage, and he has a lot of abilities that can just straight up one-tap you if you're not careful. Second phase, there's no elemental damage, but like I said, the moves are completely different, and the way his body is positioned makes it so you can lock onto multiple body parts at a time, so it's kind of hard lining up where you're trying to swing. I'm honestly not even sure of a good tip on this guy, but this fight does have summons available, so if you do need some extra help, they're right outside. Finally, we have made it to our last entry on the list. This boss is what I considered to be the hardest fight out of them all. The number one hardest boss in Lords of the Fallen goes to Judge Cleric, the Radiant Sentinel. This whole fight just felt wild. Starting with the first phase here, she has a couple of one-shot attacks, but really her hits don't hit that hard. She just attacks very quick and can stack anywhere from 3 to 5 swings into a single combo. First time around, I thought I was just gonna breeze through this, and I got pretty close, but after that I was just trapped in the absolute blender. I couldn't get out of the first phase. She also has like 10 different Radiant abilities that she uses during the fight. Some of these also target your position to close off portions of the map with thorns, so it feels like you spend a lot of the time just running around the arena. Second phase is really similar to the first phase in terms of the actual sword fight combos, but she changes up elemental damage to Inferno and changes the spells she uses with it. So the main learning curve for this part is just figuring out what firepower she has. Once you master the first phase though, second phase will come like second nature. Tip for this fight would be during the first phase, whenever she stops to charge up her Radiant ability. This is a great time to get off some throwables. Any damage helps. Well, there's no number 0, so I think that's gonna about do it for our tier list here on all the main bosses for Lords of the Fallen. I also have a review for Lords of the Fallen on my channel, and I'll leave that in the description if anyone's interested in checking that out. If there's any changes you would have made, go ahead and drop them in the comments below, or just let me know what you think of the game if you've been playing. Also, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. This has been Lunar, and welcome to Bound.